Lina, you mentioned there talking to each other and how we can communicate with each other, but hasn't that been one of the kind of the big problems of our climate movement? Is actually we talk to each other and we don't reach out to people who maybe are less engaged with this issue, and we're talking to kind of green people already. How are you going to reach kind of new people and raise awareness about the massive problems inherent in the global climate crisis?
I mean, this is an evolving question, and I think there's many answers. One thing I think about a lot is there is a massive contingent of people who already are engaged on this issue who don't define themselves as environmentalists, and are we effectively channeling their interest and their activism to force a solution on the problem? I'm not sure we've actually figured that out yet. So I'm interested. There's an expression in the U.S. called preaching to the choir, about in churches how the minister will just tell the choir what to do, but they're the most active people in the whole church. But what we like to say is if we could get the choir to sing from the same song sheet and really be working together, we could actually achieve a whole lot. So I think that has to happen at the same time as new people are brought in. But again, I'll go back to the identity of young people. In the U.S., climate change is a top issue for young people who voted in record numbers in the election that elected Barack Obama. So that is, again, something that our generation grew up thinking about. I think for previous generations, other environmental issues are important, like saving the rainforest and endangered species. For us, it's climate change. And so I think working with youth, helping youth see what they can do to make a difference, just like Lina was saying, what are the opportunities for youth? That's, I think, a real growth area that we're very connected to, and we are youth, so we can't help but want to do that. But those are the things that come to mind for me.
You've said that young people are climate change is a top issue for them, and they're really motivated by this. And I'll ask you the same question in a few seconds, so you can think about a response. But why are young people so concerned about this issue? Are they more compassionate? Do they recognise the problems more in a global sense, or are they more aware that it's their future we're talking about? Why is this something that is mobilising tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of millions of young people around the world?
I can't speak for everybody, but for me, it's two things. The first is it's about fundamentally changing the future planet that I live on. And the second thing is recognizing that it's one of the first truly global issues that every person in the world has a role in. And so I think part of the identity of young people as global citizens connects to the issue of climate change, that my actions in San Francisco, California affect Lina's life in China and vice versa. I think that to me, as a young person growing up in the 21st century, is very important.
And Lina, why do you think young people are motivated to take action in China?
I think this is partly of how China as a society is working with the world. 20 years ago, we just work in our home and we don't care the world, and we need to develop. This is the thing, and we need to eat better, live better, things like this. But now, since we have already been really connected to the world, and we know how much this affects both China and the rest of the world, that's why I think Chinese young people, they sense and they really see this as an opportunity to fulfill their mission, not only as a Chinese youth, but also as a global citizen.
I guess one thing that's kind of coming to mind is in Tianjin here, I think it feels like the climate change is kind of becoming reinvigorated as an issue, and that there's a new sense of purpose and a new determination to get to work on this issue and really start taking action. But one question that keeps popping up for me is why is the action kind of so out of sync with the science, both at a political level and at a social level amongst people? Because if you read the science, it's terrifying. Why aren't there millions of people out on the streets, every month on this issue?
Well, just to take your first question about here at these talks, I think that there's a real crisis about the science, precisely. We just put out a new report about the science behind 350. And it's just basically a review of what's already an overwhelming body of evidence that the science is saying we have to do more, not less. And in the talks, we're at the risk of the entire conversation about targets being pushed 2 years down the line. To my mind, 2 years down the line sounds like never. And so that is an extremely important concern, I think, to the whole global civil society, and that's where I see the two issues connecting. If the public doesn't think that these climate talks are about really solving the problem and what the science says, why should they care? And so my message to any negotiator here is, if you're not really talking about the science and a treaty that's going to address that, you're never going to have the public support that you need to actually get an outcome. And so I think that that's where the interplay happens between the inside negotiations and the outside public. And to your question about why aren't more people caring, if politicians don't take this seriously, why should the public care what they're doing? And so I think there's a twin challenge here. And it's a real problem right now at this exact moment in the negotiations.
Lina, what do you think in China? I guess there are lots of people taking action, and you've said yourself, the youth movement has grown, and people here have been commenting, how impressive it is that the Chinese youth movement on climate change has emerged out of nowhere to become this really formidable force. But I guess still it's relatively small compared to the population and as a concern. Why aren't more people taking action in China?
I think first is that we are really. There wasn't so much focus on this domestically from media and from really a lot of things. And the second thing is China is developing, and we have so many problems. And I heard some professors say we have water issues, we have forestry issues. You really need to think about it from the whole picture. And I agree with May that climate change is the thing that we can link the issues. Development, society, environment, everything together. So it just takes some time because China is so huge. You don't imagine that everybody heard and get up the next day say, I want to do this. So I think we really need to keep on working together, keep on being positive, because I see so much changes already happen within the past year. So many people who didn't join in this and see the opportunity as being part of it and really committed. So I think there will be more and more Chinese here. Very positive.
We've just mentioned the science there, May, and I guess this is a big problem with this issue because lots of kind of social justice issues and problems about global justice are fairly kind of obvious on a day-to-day basis, and climate change, the links are more difficult to make, and the science, like even if you're involved in this on, even if it's your job or even if you're passionate about it, the science is incredibly difficult to get your head around, and you can read one paper that says something and then somebody else comes out and challenges it. How are we supposed to convince people of the severity of this crisis?
Well, we've had a really interesting experience with this at 350 because it's a total risk to name your organization after a scientific data point. Anybody would tell you that's a bad idea.
Maybe we should explain to our viewers what is the significance of this 350?
I will absolutely do that. So 350 stands for the safe level of carbon in the atmosphere, a level we've already exceeded. So right now we're at about 390 parts per million CO2, and 350 is where we need to get to. And we started our campaign with the premise that this was an important piece of information because it reduced the whole climate science challenge into 3 simple digits. Because if you understand that we've emitted too much CO2 and we have to stop and we have to go back to a certain level, people get that. And so that information has spread all around the world. And this is something that continually surprises people, that no matter what language anybody speaks, people understand what 350 is. And so we've got 25,000 photos in a Flickr account of people in every country holding up a 350 sign. And it's not because somebody told them, hey, take this piece of paper and hold it up. They know what it is. And so we've had an unusual experience in the organizing realm of actually finding that the climate science is not too complicated for people because they can observe what's happening. And so that's been very useful to know. But I think that there's always a challenge of continuing to stay updated about what's really happening. And again, politicians are very good at squirming around what the science says we need to do. And so here at these talks, we're trying to make the point that you have to talk about the actual level of carbon in the atmosphere, because that's really what causes climate change. And if you talk about peak emissions, if you talk about these other targets, they're a little bit more fixable than a level we can measure at any point in any day of where we are with CO2. So it's a good question.
And the science has been a source of a lot of controversy in America and in the UK as well. Just on the very impressive bullet train from Beijing to Tianjin, I was talking to some of the Chinese people sitting next to me, and I said, is there controversy about the science of climate change here? Do some people deny it? And they looked at me and they said, no. I said, in America and in the UK, lots of people don't think it's man-made or don't think that it's really a problem. And there was a look of genuine confusion as this person looked at me and went, oh. I said, why? Is that your experience? Is there controversy about the science of climate change here, or do you think that most people accept it and agree with it?
I think there was, during the IPCC crisis, but
the IPCC crisis being the scientific panel, the UN scientific panel, and they got one bit of data wrong about a glacier.
But the thing is that the Chinese get to know this topic in a really scale up way is after Copenhagen, where there are more and more people convinced about this, and we believe the major scientists, the most smart people in the world, and this is what we choose, and this is what the media choose to tell the people. And I think the other thing is we kind of take a look at climate change not only from scientific perspective. It's also about how we can develop ourselves in a very responsible way and sustainable way. It's also linked with reduce the pollutions, line with the factory and the constructions. So people care about a better future, and we can link all this together to what they care. This is why they can be more convinced, not only from scientific perspective.
So it's not only about the science, it's about coming out in the morning and finding that the air is less polluted and you have a better quality of life, you're healthier, the other benefits as well. I guess maybe the last question I'll put to you then is what's the end goal of these movements? 350 is it's got a data point as its a target. Does it stop when we get to 350? What's the vision of the Chinese youth delegation, and what's the vision of 350.org?
The vision's definitely evolving, but if our goal is to keep campaigning until we get to 350, that's something that my children are going to have to take up, which is probably going to be the case anyway. But I think that
so a dynasty of campaigners.
What we really realized after Copenhagen is that we have to be really working with people around the world to identify that this is a problem this is something we're going to work on our whole lives. And this isn't like other issues. It's not like an election where you know when you win and you know when you lose. This is a problem that's with us for the rest of our lives. And even if we cut our emissions where we need to, which I believe we can do, we're still going to be working on adaptation. And so I think that it's a challenge for a movement to think so long term, but I think that the end goal really is developing a kind of movement around the world where people know what actions they can take, they're empowered to do the work, and they're continually inspired. And so that's why we focus so much on trainings and so much on connecting people around the world. So there isn't a fixed point that I look at as the end goal. It's really an evolving way of working on this. But I think we're building the kind of movement of collaboration where people genuinely want to keep doing this. I mean, I'd never met Lina until right now, but we've been in touch with each other over the past while, and that's true of people in almost any country. And so that's what's hopeful, I think, and that's where we're trying to get to.
And Lina, just very quickly, what's your kind of vision for the Chinese youth movement in a few sentences? What do you hope to achieve?
It's very easy, the youth leadership, and I say there's no end game, because I feel that the Chinese youth is responsible for our future, and we should really take the responsibilities as the leader. I think with the economic development, a lot of people want to get a good job, good money, and so on. And it's the time that Chinese youth can really get the sense of mission and develop their leadership to be a true citizen.
That's a nice note to finish on. So Lina and May, thanks ever so much for joining us, and I hope you'll join us the same time tomorrow. I think we're going to be discussing American politics a little bit and the potential to shift the game a bit there. So we'll leave it there, and thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you.